the subtitle of the book is called The Attack on Asian American Excellence and the Fight for Meritocracy. So the cause that I think needs to be examined in our country and our culture that is not often examined is this cause for meritocracy. Right? It's the idea. It's actually a central, fundamental American proposition, but not enough people acknowledge it. It's the idea that you can come from any background in the entire world, and you can come here, and you won't be treated on that background. You'll be treated on, hey, what can you contribute to this country? What can you contribute here? And Asian Americans have taken that proposition and they've run with it because they come from very poor backgrounds. Many Asian Americans do. They're political refugees. Some are educated, some aren't. Some start off very poor in this country. I mean, Vietnamese refugees, the Vietnamese Americans are it's a crazy example. 80% of them come to the U.S. with no English experience. And in the process of one generation, their kids have educational bachelor's and graduate's degrees at a higher rate than white Americans. And I mean, that runs with a lot of these Asian cultures, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, everything like that. And it's actually independent of wealth, strangely enough. It's independent of inherited wealth because Asian Americans do not come to this country with a lot of inherited wealth. And so Asian Americans prove at least that one concept in our American culture is still alive and well, and that is that America is still a country where you can achieve if you work hard. And that's something that I'm interested in preserving with this book.
Mm-hmm. So with the undermining, I don't know if it's an attack directly or not, but I have seen direct attacks on meritocracy, but with the undermining or the ignoring or the downplaying of the value of meritocracy, what happens to Asians specifically, I guess as a class, or the immigrant that comes here and starts working really hard? What happens when meritocracy becomes distrusted by the elite institutions?
So America is largely meritocracy, I would say, but the exception is the American elite. You know, America used to have a pretty meritocratic elite, right? I mean, you used to have, hey, you know, it's kind of a competition at the top and, you know, immigrants can come in and win. I mean, Rockefeller, Carnegie was I think a Scottish immigrant, or the son of, but increasingly the elite culture is becoming more entrenched. And it's also becoming more hostile to meritocracy. There are more gatekeepers than ever. And gatekeepers are antithetical to meritocracy because if you think about it, the market often decides who wins in a competition. And people often decide, and having arbitrary gatekeepers who want you based on your political orientation or based on your racial orientation or want you because of gender or legacy or things like that is antithetical to meritocracy. Mm-hmm. And this is what we see at Harvard. This is what we see in the Ivy Leagues. There's so many gatekeepers in these institutions now. And we see this increasingly in our elite financial institutions as well. I mean, the corporate recruiters who come disproportionately recruit from a small elite cadre of schools, and it's more about the brand than it is about your actual skills and knowledge. And this is already impacting Asian Americans, as I've shown in my book, because Harvard, with all of the gatekeepers that it has gatekeepers that want diversity and inclusion. Diversity and inclusion means admitting people who are Black and who are Hispanic, but not Asian. And in fact, Asians are penalized even more than whites in the admission process for these elite colleges. An Asian person has 2/3 the chance of an Asian person in the top academic decile has a lower chance than whites in the top academic decile. And an Asian student has 1/4 the chance of admissions as a Black student in the top academic decile. Asian students have to score 440 points higher on the SAT out of a 1600 SAT. That's the equivalent of 2 grade levels higher than a black student to have the same chance of admission as a black student. And all of this compounds to an effect where Asian Americans are routinely denied admissions, even though they're more highly qualified than many of the applicants in these schools. And so it is an undermining of meritocracy, and Asian Americans are likely to suffer. And it represents where our country will go and will treat Asian Americans as the principal meritocracy continues to suffer.
What do you mean by that? Where is it heading?
Well, it's heading towards this. Well, it's not just at Harvard anymore. It's not just in the Ivy Leagues. They originated it. They started the discrimination against Asian Americans. They think they're doing it for a moral purpose. But now it's leaking to everywhere else in our culture, too. And our elite public high schools, our gifted and talented programs, our magnet schools, Thomas Jefferson High School in Arlington, Virginia, had was the top science and math high school in the nation. It also had 70% Asian Americans in the high school. Then they had Ibram Kendi come speak, author of How to Be Anti-Racist. After George Floyd, he came and spoke, riled up the administration, and they passed a new proposal that says we're not going to admit based on grades and test scores anymore. We're going to admit based on a lottery, expressly for the purposes of diversity. And okay, they're going to lower the number of Asians and they're going to raise the number of blacks and Hispanics, but really they're going to raise the number of whites. Is actually the net effect of that. Interestingly enough, but the greater effect is that Thomas Jefferson High School is going to lose its reputation for being the number one high school in the nation. I mean, part of the reason why it is the number one high school in the nation and it's able to foster the extremely accelerated curriculum that it has is because it knows that all of its students are prepared for it. And now it does not have that luxury. I mean, so that's what you lose, and when you try to use policies of diversity and inclusion that put in less qualified people over more qualified people because of racial situations.